Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise, a series on capturing the journeys of resilience and well-being based on the Rise, Wellness, and Resilience framework. For those of you who are joining us today for the first time, this show is a series digging deep into the concept of resilience. In this interview series, we are talking to those in the corridor who have exhibited courage and strength in the face of hardship. These individuals are here with us to share their personal story of resilience. We hope this series will inspire hope and possibility in others. Because when we call on our courage and show up in the midst of struggle, we offer a bright place and to not give up. Together we can rise with the means to manage, restore, and grow.
I will do my very best. So I am a mom to two amazing boys. I am the wife of an amazing husband. I work here at Tanager Place. I am a community advocate for mental health, social justice related issues, education, and all things related to that. I did. Many people ask me if I'm having fun, and I don't know if fun is the right word, but I'm really glad to be at the table. Yeah, so starting back in 2001, we started the process to become parents. And in 2003, our first son was born and was just a very, very positive point in our lives. And then in 2005, our second son came to our home through adoption and was also just a very positive and wonderful addition to our family. And at that point, we were just overjoyed to be parents and to be building our family and thinking about all the different ways that our future would look as a family. Our second son came to us through transracial adoption. He was born in South Korea and came home when he was just 5 months old. So we felt very fortunate that he was able to be placed as young as he was. And at the time we were thinking things like, wow, he's so young. He's so fortunate that he was able to be placed so early and didn't experience some of the traumas that other children go through when they're placed later on in life. And we've learned a lot since then about what that's like, even with really young adoptions, but we've grown a lot over the years and experienced a lot and learned a lot about what it really looks like to experience early childhood trauma, particularly adoption trauma, and what it looks like as a family to walk that journey of healing and walk that journey of just figuring out what life looks like as a transracial family, and figuring out how to do life together and walk together through some really challenging times and also some really good times, and how to support each other through that. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think there's so much that when you start off on a journey like this, we all just long to build our families, right? And we expect trouble, we expect challenges, but I think we also expect things like that someday our children will sleep through the night, and that we don't expect that won't come until they're 7 years old. As we're going through that, we realize along the way that it's not going to be what we expected, and some of the whys behind that don't come until much later on. So as we were going along our journey, I think we realized and learned different things every day, every week, every year that started to put some of the pieces together. Like, I think I was probably 10 years into our adoption journey when I realized that development and trauma and changes to the brain actually happened in utero and not after a child is born. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, right? And then later in life, when I was being trained around ACEs and learned that separation from a biological parent was an adverse childhood experience, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because we were experiencing some really challenging things, but didn't really have context to the reasons behind that, of why would there be such pain behind a child who doesn't have any memory of these things. He was only 5 months old. Why would that be so difficult? And so as we started to understand the reasons behind that, then we could shift our interactions, and we could shift the things that we were doing to try to accommodate for what we needed to do as a family to better meet his needs and to better meet our own needs as a family. So then we learned to parent differently. We learned to interact differently, just as an entire family unit. Like, all of that stuff, if you don't understand what the behavior is communicating, then you can't address the behaviors, and you can't address the emotions that come with that. I think at first we started with what every parent starts with, of we're going to the pediatrician. Like, there's something wrong. You've got an ear infection. What's wrong with your gut? Like, you just assume that there's something wrong. And then we turned internally like, well, we're just bad parents. Like, there must be something wrong with what we're doing, because this isn't working. He's not sleeping through the night. There must be something wrong. We're doing something wrong, or there's something wrong with him. And if it's not one of those, then what is it? And when neither of those two things, we changed our parenting style, that didn't work. The doctor's like, nope, there's nothing wrong. At some point, we just had to reflect on, okay, so then what is it? So then we started looking deeper into resources. And one of the very first things that I found that was really, truly life-changing for me was a resource group on Facebook. And it was a group called Parenting with Connection. And that group was incredibly valuable to me. It really helped me to start to see parenting through a different lens, of people who've experienced trauma, experience the world differently, and behavior is communication. And in order to parent children who've experienced trauma, what we have to do is parent through relationship and communicate through behavior. And so when we're seeing these behaviors, like not sleeping through the night for 7 years, that when a child is throwing themselves on the floor, they're not communicating or that they're bad kids, but that they've just flipped their lid and they cannot be rationalized within that moment, and how to walk through that with the child. That's communicating a need. It's not a kid being bad. It's not a parent not parenting effectively. It's communicating a need. And that's really when things started to shift. Not that anything got magically better, because we're all human and we all still struggle throughout life, but we started to see things from a different lens. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's a real vulnerability in recognizing that we are all broken people, and we are all walking along a mental health journey ourselves. And in order to be and represent our best selves, we have to do our own work. And we can't be the best selves for other people if we're not connecting to our own emotions and dealing with our own stuff. And so I think part of that for me as a parent was not only just reflecting on what are the things that are inhibiting me from being able to respond with love and to respond with calmness, but also doing my own work. And so I started going to therapy just because I need a space to be able to process my own stuff and to figure out, why am I so triggered by these things and these things and these things, whether it's with my own relationships with my spouse or my friends or both of my kids. There are things that we all are triggered by, and there are pieces of all of us, no matter what the parenting situation is or the work situation is or whatever. And I think through that process, I have learned a lot about myself and learned how to better navigate those parenting challenges throughout life. And I still check in with my therapist as needed, because I'm a huge advocate for therapy. I think that everybody needs a therapist that they can check in with, because how do you become your best self for others if you're not doing that for yourself first?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yep. So I think one of the biggest things for me is that we are on a journey. All of us are on our own journey, right? But we're all on a journey of life. And one of the things that we continue as a family to experience is this lens of inequity, and that not everybody can show up at school and sit in a seat and have the same positive experiences. I struggle with the fact that we are the parents to two children, and both of our two children have lived in the same home for almost their entire lives, and yet those two children have had grossly different experiences in their school. through their peer relationships, through some experiences with adults, and that's not okay with me. It is really, really challenging for me to sit back on the sidelines and to see the ways that the children in our community are held back and don't have access to the things that they need. Knowing what my family has gone through, I'm somebody who has a really hard time sitting on the sidelines. And so that has really fueled a lot of my fire. I remember the very first time my son came home, and he was probably in first grade at the time, and he was in tears over the fact that a kid was like making fun of his eyes and talking about how this other kid didn't understand why his eyes were shaped the way that they were, and just thought that they looked ridiculous. And those are like such little things in the grand scheme of things, but that was such a gut-wrenching thing to hear. How do you begin to process that's his perception of himself? And we know now that it's not just about the little bits and pieces of what people are hearing about what they look like. It's people that are truly being held back from being able to be successful. And we've got to do something. We can't sit idly by and watch these things happening in our community and not be part of the solution. So I think that's a big part of my why and why I do what I do, because I so strongly believe that every single person in this community has value and has something to offer, and we need to create the space and create the opportunities for them to be able to reach their full potential. A piece of it for us is not that it's one person is Korean and the rest of us are American. It's we have a connection to the Korean culture in our family as a whole. So, for example, we go to a Korean culture camp every summer, and we have the opportunity to connect with other families who are Korean and learn about the Korean culture, and connect with adults who are Korean, and connect with other Korean adoptees, and really invest in learning about the Korean culture and learning how to cook Korean meals and learning the language. And there are pieces of that for him are really important in terms of meeting and being around other kids, so that there's at least one time in his life where he is not the minority. That is a really important part of our story and a really important piece for him. Having those racial mirrors is super, super important. And I think for any transracial adoptee, it's so important for them to have those people in their lives that they can look up to and see, not just a bunch of white people around them all the time, but do I see people that look like me that are in positions that I might be interested in someday? Yes. So I think that's a piece of it. I also think that there's also a really important aspect of staying connected, if at all possible, to biological family. And I know that particularly in international adoption, is incredibly difficult and unusual, but I do believe deep down in my soul that is a benefit in almost every situation. And I know that there are many people out there that would disagree with me, because there's a perception that if it's an unhealthy quote unquote unhealthy person or relationship, that it's better to not be involved in those relationships. But I think what research is showing more and more is that connection to biological family, even when our perceptions are that those individuals are maybe not the healthiest, in the healthiest situations, like maybe they're experiencing some mental health challenges, or they're dealing with substance use disorders, things like that, that does not make them disqualified to be part of a child's life or an adult's life. They can still have a very valuable place in somebody's life and can fill a really important void that an adoptive parent or other community members just can't fill. We just know that, and there's something to that is just incredibly important. I think that there's just a realization that I am who I am, and I play a really important part in my children's lives. I will always play that part. That will never change. But I will never be able to be the part of somebody else. There's a piece of our DNA that is connected to our biological family members. While that's not something that everybody needs, there are people who just need that and need that connection, need to know, just have questions that they need answered. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to have those questions answered and wanting to have more than the relationships that they have. For me to say that by having a second child that negates the quality of the relationship with my first child, I don't think that there's a parent alive that would say that that's not accurate, that they couldn't have another child because they wouldn't be able to love their first child as much. We understand that with the child relationship, but I really do believe that people who have relationships with multiple parents in different roles just have more opportunities to love more people in their lives in different ways, but more. And so, yes, there's nervousness that comes with that, but mostly nervousness around, will they be okay? Will there be pain involved? Protection pieces, just like we want to protect all of our kids, right? So, like, who doesn't want to be in a protective role for our kids? But
I love that you bring kids
yes,
who very cultivate their own.
hmm
Family unit to
Yeah.
be. And
Right.
how, when, where united
Right.
and be open to protect.
Yeah. And the how is different for each family, right?
Absolutely.
Like sometimes it does need to be more restrictive. The value of having some level of contact with biological family members, I just really don't think can be underrated. I think the thing I would say most of all is to connect with resources and therapists that have specialty in attachment-based work. I have learned so much along the way from connecting with the Parenting with Connection group and attachment therapists and people who are trained specifically in attachment-based therapeutic models, and books like the Dr. Siegel's books around understanding how the brain works. And I think having some resources on understanding trauma is a really good starting point. And I'm sure you have probably 5 times as many resources as I do that you could share, but I would say an attachment therapist and connecting with online resources in that realm, and those are
taking care of
and
you.
yes, 1,000 times yes.
Yes, which means good sleep, good eat, exercise, friends,
Which are all so
activities.
hard to do when you're living in a home that's experiencing a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
But pick one thing,
Yeah.
because when you are in that environment, sometimes it can be next to impossible to do any of those things. So finding that therapist might be your one and only thing that you can fit in. So sometimes you just are in survival mode for really, really long extended times, and you've got to find your one thing that will get you through the day. And it might be your therapist, or it might be a meditation app on your phone with headphones. Like, that's something that I found really, really helpful, because when there were meltdowns happening in the living room and they were something that we knew couldn't be handled, I knew that that was something that was really centering for me. EFT tapping app is another one that I found really centering. So I think there's some little things that people can do in the privacy of their own homes in those couple minutes, when you can find just 2 or 3 minutes.
Take a little extra longer shower.
Even if there's somebody right there. Headphones, noise canceling headphones came to be my best friend for a few years.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Support is out there.
You're okay just how you are.
The staff members and the people that I met along the way just made me realize that there are genuine people out there that actually just want to help.
But it will get better.
We all have that humanity in common.
Kind of like to think of it as like some butterfly effect.
You have to find what makes you happy.
I'm here for a reason, and my future self is going to be so thankful that I didn't throw in the towel because it got tough.
We all want to be heard. We all want to be felt like we matter, and we all want to be loved. That's universal.
Life choices I made may be the reason that I'm having a harder time, and not feeling shame in that.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager Place is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager Place.
Thank you again for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and healing. Today's series brought to you by Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website